We have a server in a rack that has enough PCIe slots to run 6 graphics cards, but the chassis only has room for 4. We wanted to use the other 2 slots, so we got this open-air PC case to hold the 2 cards that won't fit. However, since this case doesn't come with rack ears, I'm going to have to design some.
I began by measuring the height and width of the assembly. I plopped those dimensions into Fusion and extruded a somewhat arbitrary depth, since I don't need the precise depth for this design. I found rack dimensions on racksolutions.com and determined that the height of the case is just under 3U, as shown by these horizontal dotted lines. I marked the distances for the minimum rack opening, the center line for the mounting holes, and the typical outer edge of the front panel. I replicated the rack mounting hole pattern from the same website and gave the holes a 7mm diameter. I extruded this panel 3mm from the front of the machine. Here I'm changing component colors so it's easier to see. Then I moved on to the side geometry. I measured the hole locations on the included gusset that secures the front of the assembly to the bottom and replicated the pattern in Fusion. I drew this diagonal, making sure it connected to the top of the front panel and extended sufficiently back on the machine. I printed a 0.6mm or 3-layer thick test for each face of the bracket to test fit. When I got that done, I gave the bracket some thickness and added chamfers where the 2 panels meet. And I filleted this corner to make it less pointy. We don't need all of this material here, and honestly, I probably could have made this fillet even bigger.
I printed off 1 rack ear in PETG. After I confirmed that it looked good, I mirrored the model in the slicer to print off a second rack ear, also in PETG. The parts I designed are intended to replace the included gussets, and you can assemble it with or without the gussets. Once I have the rack ears installed, this assembly fits nicely in a server rack.
I printed these out of PETG instead of PLA because I wanted to make sure they're strong enough to hold the weight. And these GPUs put off tons of heat, so I wanted to make sure the rack ears wouldn't plasticize and droop from the heat.
We have functional 3D printed rack ears. I will put these up on printables and MakerWorld, and I'll leave a link to this open air PC case on Amazon. But this is not the end of the project, because ideally, these rack ears would be made out of sheet metal. Of course, I'm 99% sure I can't just send this file to someone and say, please make this, but with sheet metal. So now I need to learn how to use the sheet metal tool in Fusion. I only ever used the sheet metal tools probably a decade ago when I followed some Intro to Fusion 360 tutorial that showed me how to model a binder clip, and I promptly forgot just about everything in that tutorial.
Instead of drawing new sketches, I want to try to make use of the same sketches I drew earlier. So I made an unlinked copy of my rack ear component and created a new sheet metal component. I moved the sketches I wanted over into the new sheet metal component. I created a base from the side of my box. I'll change it over to the gusset profile later on. I went into the front sketch to get a measurement for the front flange, which ends up being 20.8mm, and I extruded the flange that distance. Here I'm checking that the distance I typed in looks right. Then I go in and change the base profile to the triangular sketch and go back and get the tippy bit of the triangle. Now I have to drill holes in the front for mounting the assembly in the rack. I still have all 9 holes drawn, but I really only need to cut the top and bottom holes. I folded the part flat and then added some fillets to round out the sharp corners, and I made the fillet on this bottom corner bigger than I did on the printed part.
Here's the sheet metal version next to the PETG version. And here is what the case looks like with 2 sheet metal rack ears.
I updated the sheet metal parameters in Fusion based on the information from SendCutSend and sent them my file. They cut the parts from stainless steel with fiber laser, bent the parts, deburred, and then powder coated them. Here are the GPUs connected to PCIe extenders for poking the AI. We used rack studs to mount the case. They're threaded glass fiber reinforced polyamide studs that mount directly to the rack and hold up the machine while you twist the nuts on instead of messing around with cage nuts. I'll leave a link to these in the description. Thanks for watching! Go check out the links to these 3D models and others on Printables and MakerWorld in the description, as well as links to the PC case and the rack studs I used.
I'll post the file up on Thingables. Thingables? Thingables! Yes, that's a new one.